Two newsstands robbed in broad daylight in Manhattan.
Two men attacked a worker and stole cash and lotto tickets.
And then just about 20 minutes later, and just across Central Park, a newsstand operator was held at...
So those two robberies happened last week, but for months, crooks have been targeting newsstands and convenience stores all over town. And not only has this caused some stores to close, it's leading to more crime at the stores that remain open, which now get robbed over and over again, in some cases by the exact same thieves every single time.
A police search tonight for a repeat robber seen on video holding up the same bodega not once, not twice, but 3 different times.
The NYPD says it's one of 9 violent newsstand and concession stand robberies in the last 2 weeks by the same 4-man crew. Cash is still king at the newsstands. In this case, that meant thousands of dollars.
I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. It's not safe here. The New York City is very difficult.
That day it was more than 10,000 because we carry lottery here.
It's the same people over and over again. These are bad people who are doing bad things to good people.
Mayor Eric Adams at City Hall zeroing in on repeat offenders, blaming the violence that swept over the city last night on recidivism.
3 armed robberies in 3 months at the FM Deli Grocery. Now, to avoid getting hurt again, the owner has been letting the crook take off with the money.
Criminals like this don't deserve to be out in the streets threatening everyone.
What started as a crime wave back in January is now so bad our convenience stores are closing and they're not coming back. But what everyone's missing is that even though these stores have been getting raided for months, we've got so many simultaneous crime waves in this city that the police, they've been redeployed, sent elsewhere, which explains why our family-run businesses are now totally defenseless. Because as we speak, Central Park is crawling with police who are responding to a crime wave over there. And when you combine that with the police surge taking place in our subways to combat crime underground, it seems the city only has enough police left to respond to emergencies at major retailers like Lululemon or Victoria's Secret. Because while the economic loss and embarrassment from a large retailer closing are just unacceptable, when our family businesses close over crime, that never seems to make national news. But there's another problem, because as you're about to see, both physical stores like bodegas and newsstands have design flaws that not only make these places sitting ducks for criminals, but also make them potentially more profitable than, say, robbing a Walgreens or CVS. But the real reason why many of these places are in danger of shutting down, it's not just because the city can't protect them, it's also because every time someone robs one, they get released. And many of the criminals hitting these places up day after day, week after week, they've been arrested doing it before, yet they've never faced any consequences for their actions. And they're now back out on the streets, plotting their next move, revealing that New York's decriminalization of theft has not created a progressive crime-free utopia. No, instead, critics say these policies have filled our streets with career criminals who are now robbing these places so violently and so frequently, many of them don't have much time left. So, newsstands and bodegas, these are our convenience stores, and as you'll notice, they're pretty small, especially in the case of newsstands. Bodegas, those are like a miniature grocery store selling snacks, selling drinks, making sandwiches. They'll be in storefronts, but these things, they're just a metal box on the side of the sidewalk, and I was pretty surprised that there was a crime wave targeting these, because usually they're in high traffic locations where there's plenty of cops. But as you're about to see, the small size of both bodegas and newsstands make them prime targets for criminals, because even though they're small, sometimes these places are full of surprisingly large amounts of money. Especially these places.
I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe.
Shah Hussein was robbed in the middle of the afternoon, working in his tiny newsstand at 81st Street and Columbus Avenue, just steps from the Museum of Natural History, where thieves pushed their way inside at 1 p.m. yesterday.
So the first problem that these newsstands have is they're very small, so small that it makes them very hard to protect, and they're just out here on the middle of the street, wide open, which makes them even less safe to run than a bodega, which is inside a storefront. Now, bodegas have their own problems, which we'll get to, but with newsstands, they don't have the security of being inside a larger building that may have emergency exits in the back of the store or back rooms that could be locked. No, instead, they're just sitting right here. There's only one way in and one way out. And while these places have always had a low security, low footprint type of model with food and snacks right in front of people walking by that do get stolen from time to time. Rampant crime has become much more of a problem as crooks have realized these places have much more inside than just candy and soda. Some sell lottery tickets, which are high value purchases, and many at the end of the day are full of cash that needs to get taken to a bank. What's more, they're so small with only just one person inside, there's really no room for a security team like you'd find at a Target, which makes a place like this a tempting target for thieves who can sit across the street or down the block that way and watch them waiting for the right moment to make their move.
He says the two men wearing masks and hooded sweatshirts roughed him up before stealing roughly $3,000 in cash. NYPD detectives say that exactly 23 minutes earlier, two men robbed this newsstand on 79th Street, just west of York Avenue. Police say the thieves escaped with $1,100 in cash and lottery tickets. Investigators now believe the...
So what's crazy about this is after robbing those two newsstands uptown, the thieves made about $4,100 in 30 minutes of work, which included travel time between the two places they stole from. This was likely a pre-planned heist. The thieves probably knew how these stores were operated, knew what to expect when they showed up, and had it all figured out way ahead of time. And as you can see, there's only one way into these places. It's a big steel door right on the side. And what they probably did was wait for the owner to exit the store, which would mean that the door's unlocked, or they just forced their way in, which is incredibly frightening. And inside these little stores, you don't have running water, you don't have a sink, you don't have a bathroom. At some point, whoever's in there has to come out. And with most of them carrying things like lottery, they're pretty much all a tempting target for criminals who see them unguarded, which isn't a problem in areas of town like Midtown where you've got plenty of police, but in other neighborhoods where the police have been taken away or redeployed, it's a big issue. And this has led to very bizarre robbery patterns at newsstands and, as we'll soon see, bodegas, which the city has never seen before. And that's crazy because many of these places, they're old. They've been around for 10, 15, 20 years. And now their very existence is being threatened.
Police patrols have driven down crime in nearby Central Park, but recent statistics suggest that the problem may be getting pushed to the outskirts. Along the eastern border, robberies are up 400%. On the southern border of the park, grand larceny is up 43%.
So, Central Park, we've essentially turned it into an airport security checkpoint. There are so many police there, it looks like half the force has been redeployed into the park itself. But now it looks like our criminals are following the path of least resistance, robbing the stores that surround the park. Not just the newsstands that surround it, but also the bodegas, many of which are in residential neighborhoods to the east and west of Central Park. Many of these neighborhoods are so packed with apartments and tiny storefronts that there's no way a grocery store could operate, which is why it's now up to smaller scale operations to do the work that big stores can't because there's no room for a big store. But now that police are busy protecting one of New York's icons, Central Park, crime has been forced upon them in ways nobody ever imagined, which is scary because since these are the last places around serving some communities, once they're gone, you've got to ask yourself, what in the world are people gonna do?
New concerns tonight about the safety of bodega workers in the Bronx.
This time it has to do with those who deliver from the store to your door.
It's a new robbery scheme that has many Bronx bodega owners and their employees on edge. The delivery worker gets on their moped and drives to the location, but once they arrive, they are met by thieves who take off with the food, money, and the moped.
So not only are the bodegas getting hit in an equally strange way to the newsstands, it's happening as they go out of their way to help people in the community who might need a delivery service but might not be tech savvy, may want to pay for things in cash. That's how a lot of these places have operated for decades, and now they're paying for it. With delivery riders getting robbed by thugs carrying weapons at the point where they're supposed to drop things off. Criminals, they come out, apparently they've got helmets on to conceal their identity, and they say, hey, give me everything you have, I don't have any money, what are you gonna do? And sometimes they even steal the delivery rider's moped and any money that they have on them in case the person were to need change. Now you might be thinking to yourself, with so much theft and crime going on in New York City, what business does a little place like this have putting themselves at existential risk by offering some sort of delivery service which puts the rider at total risk of getting robbed because it hasn't been paid in advance? Well, some people say this is what happens when city officials consistently talk about how New York is the safest big city in America and how crime across many categories isn't what it was 50 years ago, which might be true, but it's also true that many crimes in this city don't get reported or prosecuted. And now you've got little businesses that are barely hanging on, letting their guard down at the worst possible moment. But it's not just the delivery workers that are getting hammered here, it's also the physical infrastructure inside the stores themselves.
Take a look look at the video of the masked men that police are hoping to find. Police say they're behind 40 ATM burglaries. Police say the group breaks into businesses and takes the ATM, the coin machine, merchandise, and cash from the registers. The members then flee.
So this little place back here, for example, it's got an ATM inside, and with gangs of robbers out there on the loose who've stolen over 40 ATMs without getting caught, it puts places like this in danger. And these crooks that are out there breaking into these businesses at night and stealing their ATMs, they're the perfect example of the bigger issue that's out there facing these stores, which affects pretty much every cash business in town, including laundromats, which also operate with ATM machines inside. And that problem is that this city is totally unable in its present state to do anything about any of this crime. That's why it keeps happening over and over again, in spite of the security measures that many of these places might have. Because since they cover their faces, store security cameras are often useless. And because they drive away in stolen vehicles, there's no way to track those cars back to the thieves themselves. And if you think crooks making over $4,000 in 30 minutes stealing from newsstands is a lot, these bodegas can have 10 times that much inside of them when they're open, that is. Look at this, a bodega recently this year was hit for $100,000. That's insane. But it does make sense. Many of these businesses have been doing things the exact same way, day after day, week after week, year after year. And if the owner's only used to bringing his cash deposits to the bank once or twice a week, maybe even less than that, he's not going to change his ways until something bad happens. But as crime continues trending in the wrong direction, shuttering our convenience stores, this is only going to happen more and more often. Which is crazy, because you'd think that with these places being as necessary as they are to many communities, the city would do more to keep them open. But they're designed in a way that requires a city of law in order for them to operate. But the city's dropped the ball on that, which, as you're about to see, makes these places sitting ducks as well. So with these little neighborhood bodegas being kind of the last mile as far as grocery service is concerned for many residents, you'd think that more would be done to keep them open. But as you're about to see, the city's laws actually work against these places, even when they do what the city says they need to do to stop crime.
Police search tonight for a repeat robber seen on video holding up the same bodega in the Bronx, not once, not twice, but 3 different times.
Now, to avoid getting hurt again, the owner has been letting the crook take off with the money.
People already scared.
So this is extremely disheartening, and the place in this video, it's gonna look like this empty storefront right here pretty soon, because it's not a bodega anymore. It's a thieves' personal warehouse that he steals from whenever he feels like it. And the owner's essentially given up, surrendered to the criminal, just letting him take stuff so he doesn't get hurt. That little store is about the same size as an establishment like this. These places are blanketed in security cameras, which again don't do a whole lot to keep people off the streets when the city won't jail them. And what's even worse is that the criminals going after these places, they tend to be armed. And even though some of you watching this might think to yourselves, well, if I just arm myself, I'll be fine, nobody will mess with my store, think again. Because a couple years ago, New York City let the world know that if you defend yourself in the face of crime, the city will come after you like there's no tomorrow. In this very sad story, a bodega worker defended themselves from an armed criminal who made their way behind the cash register and went after them, but Manhattan's district attorney decided to prosecute the worker, who was attacked on camera and took matters into his own hands. Very tragic, very sad, but it's got a lot of people running places like this thinking to themselves, gee, I better just let the crooks take what they want. No one's gonna protect me. But that's the sad reality of how decriminalization works. What it does is it takes criminals and says that they aren't. And instead it says that they're victims of some external force that is forcing them to commit the crimes they commit. And another reason this is a problem is because that this decriminalization thinking has actually spilled over into how police officers tell store owners to protect themselves, which, as you can imagine, has resulted in half-hearted security measures that don't do anything to stop crime.
The United Bodegas of America says vigilance, security cameras, and arrests can only do so much when violent criminals are being released without bail. They say it's time the laws change.
Criminals like this.
So this might shock you, but police, they are already aware that their efforts in arresting people and getting them off the streets are only temporary. They know those crooks are just going to come right back. But nonetheless, when they do a security audit, they tell these businesses to camera up if they haven't already. Because maybe one day in the future, we'll decide to prosecute the criminals we have on video robbing these places. If they even make an arrest, that is. We've got so few police that oftentimes when they're called to the scene of a robbery at a neighborhood bodega or other small business like this, they don't even show up. Or when they do show up, it's a couple of days later. Yes, they take a report, They get a description, they get all the evidence, but it leads nowhere. Which has many of our leaders now admitting that it's the laws in this city that need to be looked at if we want our basic businesses, our newsstands, our convenience stores to survive. And that includes the mayor.
It's the same people over and over again.
Mayor Eric Adams at City Hall today zeroing in on repeat offenders, blaming the violence that swept over the city last night on recidivism.
These are bad people who are doing bad things to good people.
So the issue that we have here is our laws. They don't just release people. The people who get released, they don't learn anything. So they go on to become repeat offenders who are still out there right now, putting these places at risk of shutting down permanently. And the problem with this is not only do these criminals get a second chance to commit more crime in the future, but the only lessons they end up learning are how to avoid getting arrested the next time they start stealing. That's the real issue here. We're making them better at being criminals, not better at being law-abiding citizens. And observers say that if there's no jail time, what they're doing must not appear to these criminals to be a crime because they never actually get punished for it. And even though we're told over and over again that decriminalization efforts actually make our streets safer, new studies show that crime has actually increased in New York since these justice reforms took place. Is that true? Does decriminalization make our city and our stores less safe? Is that the reason why so many of these places get robbed over and over again by what seems like the exact same people every single time? Should we give those people second chances? What will they learn on their 15th arrest that they didn't learn on their 14th arrest? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.